Hello everyone, Lisa here with a relatively quick walkthrough of a deck that I am becoming increasingly obsessed with. This deck that came out in 1893 in a black and white version produced by Giovanni Vacchetta, who was a designer. Actually, he became an important figure at the Academy Albertina in Turin in the late 19th, early 20th century. And, you know, that's an academy that, as I understand it, specializes in kind of fine arts. So, you know, very much he was interested in architecture, in medieval architecture, and you can see some of the architectural features in the deck. But this deck, really what makes it, he's also a really great watercolorist, apparently. This deck, what makes it really special is the refinement of the details. Now, Lo Scarabeo came out with a version of this deck that is very easy to come by. You can get it for under $20 from Book Depository or Amazon or wherever you buy your decks, called the Tarot of the Master. And they're calling it the Tarot of the Master because he was a Meister. He was, you know, he was an academic. He was a designer at a leading fine arts academy of his day. He made this deck when he was like 30, and I don't know anything really about his biography and why he made a tarot deck. I also don't really know if this deck was ever used as anything other than just a little work of art, because it was produced in black and white. Now you can actually, and I'll have some links below, you can actually find online files of the black and white images. I'll talk a little bit about the Meneghello version in a second. Black and white images from his original 1893 production of the deck. You can download those. You can probably use them to make your own tarot cards. You can also, there is someone on Game Crafter who has taken those black and white images and put them into sepia. So you can get this deck, make it your own, color it in your own way. There are 3 published versions that exist of this deck that I know of. One I don't have. I'll have a link to it below. It's out of print and a little bit hard to get, although I've seen it for sale on eBay. There's this one, really easy to come by. And then there's the Meneghello, which was a limited edition of 1,500 copies, but still fairly easy to come by. I bought mine on eBay, basically direct from Collect Tarot, but I bought it on eBay, and it was $40. So this just gives a little, the Meneghello deck just gives a little biographical information, you know, that he was, for 50 years, he was, now this is saying that he was at the Politecnico of Turin. He was the director of the Civic Museum of Classical Ancient Art. But Wikipedia says that he was at the Accademia Albertina. So I'm not sure. I'm not sure what he probably held multiple positions in his life. He was an illustrator and a watercolorist. And these Navi cards, Navi I think comes from the Arabic word for deputy, and it goes back to those early cards that were the origin in the Muslim world of what became the tarot. So these Navi cards are, you know, have a particular gusto and refinement to them. All of that information just points to this fact about these cards, which is there is no original coloring for these cards. So the 3 published versions that exist, each of them have a different coloration to them. What you're getting with this deck is really the extraordinary precision, detail, expressivity of the drawings. And they're really unusual. Now, we tend in our tarot community to refer to any pip deck as a Marseille-style deck, particularly if it was produced before, like, you know, 1900s. This is not a Marseille. I mean, it borrows from those French decks that were produced in places like Marseille and Lyon in the 18th century, but it has its own sense of style and its own embellishments that really make it fascinating to read with. So, you know, in the trumps, I mean, the expressions are amazing, and I love we'll talk about cardstock in a minute, but I love the Meneghello cardstock, and a shout out to Melanie Lucia, who first enabled me to get this deck, and she just said, you know, I want to shuffle it all day long. Whoops. Oh well. There goes the Emperor. She said, I want to shuffle it all day long, and it has that really nice cardboard and the square corners that we see in a lot of the Meneghello decks, but the cardboard is bendy, which is really nice. Just to look at the backs, by the way. The backs on the Lo Scarabeo deck are quite unfortunate. They just have the Magician, and they're obviously not reversible. But these backs are your typical Meneghello kind of historical backings. And Kelly Fitzgerald has a really great video about the Lo Scarabeo version of this deck. Tom Benjamin, also a huge enabler for many of us, particularly those of us interested in the Marseille and Pip decks. He has a great walkthrough of the Meneghello. In Kelly's walkthrough of the Lo Scarabeo version, she shows what this looks like trimmed, because, you know, that can be really weird. I mean, we've got, you know, these keywords that are also, some of them are just tied to the titles of the card, but, you know, it's not as bad as some Lo Scarabeo, multiple European languages, but it's distracting, and I don't mind it terribly, but, you know, to have this version, the Meneghello version, yeah. But I have to say, although I love the Meneghello version, there's something about the coloration in the Lo Scarabeo, the muted tones, which is really lovely. So, as I think I was saying a minute ago, the trumps, they have the, you know, the facial expressions and the details are unique, and they are very, I think, in keeping with the style of Giovanni Vacchetta, of the master, the maestro. And, you know, they have sort of some architectural features that are interesting, that recall his training. But then there are places, what I think makes this deck really special is the way in which, and we start to see it with the Hermit, he departs from the traditional Marseille iconography and does interesting things. Like, what is it to have the Hermit, like, sitting under this thatched roof? You know, he's not on his journey. He's sitting down. He's reading like the papist, like the high priestess, and his light is at his feet. This version of the Wheel of Fortune, which takes the sense that, you know, you're up, you're down, 1 minute, you know, 1 minute you're on top, 1 minute you're on the ground, to a really gruesome level with the wheel actually turning on the body of the person who used to be on top. And I kind of love this strength card. The Lion, really, I mean, she's controlling him just with her hand. There's a lot of, and this seems to me very distinct for Vacchetta's art, these like embellishments of the flowing ropes. It's everywhere. We see these ribbons all throughout the deck. And they become, in my experience in doing readings, the ribbons become something that you can follow and think about and interpret. So you can talk about, for instance, how the ribbon in Temperance, you know, sort of moves into the serpent in the Devil, and then, you know, is echoed potentially in some of the ribbons of fire in the Tower. I mean, this deck has it's like has this innocent and kind of endearing I don't, the refinement is a good word for it, like these very refined images, but then, you know, oh, and there he is pierced on part of the broken tower. I love the star card. I love in the Lo Scarabeo version. It's, I think, my favorite card. You know, and then this just very, this is the central figure in the moon, right? So, okay, we have a lady here. Who is a lady of her, I mean, she's Diana, right? She's a goddess. She's got her bow. You know, he's bringing in classical imagery, but he's also bringing in mythological imagery, which isn't so much in the deck. And so the fact that he was you know, an art historian interested in antiquity and in the Middle Ages, that we see that in the deck. Okay. It's sort of more traditional. I love, you know, we've got the 4 seasons here overlaid, you know, autumn, summer, winter, and spring overlaid on the more traditional Marseille tradition of the 4 evangelical figures. Okay, it's in the pips, I think, though, where things get really, really weird. Okay, his title card. The arrangement of the suit elements do not look like the arrangements that we're used to at all from the Marseille deck. So you have to read this deck on its own terms. And it allows you, it gives you so much information to read, you know. Here we've got the four of swords, right? You've got this, you know, even thinking about ways in which there's resonance here with a Rider-Waite-Smith reading, you know, this sort of suspension of activity, the hand and the helmet, they're tied together, but neither is attached to the actual soldier. So, you know, how is battle suspended? We have a way where this 4 of swords comes really close to the imagery we might be used to from Pixie's deck. And then, you know, loss. I mean, here, that same helmet and gauntlet and glove, right, with the sort of sword of Damocles hanging over it. But this is very much an image of loss, isn't it? An image of, you know, the battle is over, and there has been a loser. So we get a sense, a little bit of a sense of, you know, thinking forward, what will emerge a decade, a little bit more than a decade after this deck emerges, is published in 1893, this deck, and then 1909 we get the Waite-Smith deck. We get some of the imagery that is activated within the Waite-Smith deck. And so, you know, I don't think he had any connection to the Golden Dawn at all, but somehow the numbers and the suit elements are taking him to the same place that Pixie will go with her imagery, where that Waite will go. This is really interesting. So this is the 9 of Swords, right? So we think of this as the nightmare card. And, you know, it's not, the 3 of Swords in this deck isn't particularly, it doesn't recall what we think of the 3 of Swords from the Waite-Smith deck. It's totally different. But here we have that heart being pierced. And notice how the blood and the ribbons are related in this deck. And then the 10, this might in some ways be closer to the knives in the back, the swords in the back of the 10. But the 10 itself also has a kind of sense of completion. I love the mixture of the kinds of swords, daggers, rapiers, etc. And the court cards in this deck tend to give us a fuller depiction of the life of the court. So, you know, in the page, the Fante, you know, we see how he is sort of in allegiance to the lord and lady who are up in the dais. This Queen of Swords, okay, you know, here we have, she says this is very much Judith and Holofernes, right? Holofernes, right? She's cut off his head, she's carrying it away. There's the body. So again, there's a kind of charming, very, you know, almost like a children's book from the 19th century quality to the engravings here, but the subject matter is as gory as it needs to be. The kings are not seated in this deck. They're quite regal and ready to move. Here we have the jester. So the ace of batons, the ace of wands, is, you know, tied to the jester's staff. And just to go back to the fool, Yamato, with his weird little leopard sidekick, who's not biting at his ass, but his ass still is exposed. You can see how, you know, the kind of jester-like qualities of the fool. Here we see him as the ace of wands. Whoops. You know, so again, I mean, there's some ways in which there might be some echoes of some of the stuff we know from the Smith Waite. It's not, this is not a Marseille deck. Each of these pips, very pippish, but there's so much going on. So here, you know, we don't have ships out at sea, but we've got this kind of dragon-like sea creature, the sea serpent. Sort of an image of home and hearth and celebration, the four. This bears no resemblance to imagery in either the Marseille deck or in the Smith Waite. It just is what it is. The bastoni seem to have this tie also to music. I mean, even just thinking about the jester with his bells on his hat. Here we have the bastone tied to these pipes. I love this hand here. And I don't really know what that's. Something about different diversi fatti. I don't know. My Italian isn't good enough to read this on the fly. I like this eight of wands, you know, which is tied to harvest and farming. But this, I love the 9 of wands. So, you know, it's, you know, sweet sound, sweet auditum. Sweet, not really sweet sounds. I don't really know how to translate that Latin. I'm like someone who loves language, has a smattering of languages, can read a lot of languages with a dictionary, but on the fly, not so good. Okay. I love this 10 of wands with the with the snails on it. And the frog. I mean, this, you know, we've got the whole natural little insect kingdom, but like also the sense of delay and slowness, which to me makes sense for the 10 of wands and its sense of impasse. And I love all the dogs in this deck. Here again, we've got the jester image with, you know, the bells on the cap. And what about, you know, the Queen of Wands having a sheep by her side? Little Bo Peep, Queen of Wands. Okay, I'm going to move a little bit more quickly now, so I'm not, or I'm going to try to, but then you see a monkey for the Ace of Cups. What the hell? And another title card. We're used to seeing a title card with the 2 of Cups. Here we have it. You know, this balancing act of the 3 of Cups. The 4. And I think the cups have this regal, presentational, you know, a lot of, like I love here, they're almost like incense braziers with what look like flames coming out of the top. So it's, you know, it's this world of kind of a lot of intimacy, this world of, you know, decoration. I mean, there's, I think almost, you know, the sort of domesticity of some of these cards. So this curious blend of kind of a domestic imagery and then something that looks more regal or even church-like with some of the imagery of what look like incense yours. Or Braziers, I guess. I think it's interesting here, the decision made on the Meneghello part to have him only have one stocking. Again, these were black and white, so the colorist is making some decisions. Yeah, so here, the sense of hearth and home in the cups, like, you know, okay, I'm celebrating, I'm roasting up some you know, game hens or whatever. I have a knife. Don't make me use it. Let's just eat, let's just drink and be merry. Oh, and he is sitting down, isn't he? But this isn't a throne. You know, so the cups here have a kind of a little bit of the feel that we might associate with pentacles. But I think the denarii, you know, make it, notice how this, the ace has actually three coin figures on it. I don't know what that is. Gustus, I don't know what that. I really would, you know, love to research a little bit more and figure out what some of the references are in the writing. Notice this connection here to spades, which I don't know what to make of that. You know, normally we think of the Italian suits of the cups, discs, swords and wands as relating to, or batons as relating to, the spades relate to the swords. But here he's drawing attention between the denarii and the spades. Spades, clubs, diamonds, and hearts are the French suit elements. The Italian suit elements are the ones that we're familiar with from the tarot. I love this 3 of coins, discs. And again, you know, this, I mean, he was interested in the fine arts, and music is part of that world of refinement. So there's a lot of musical imagery here. Framed picture, the way that this ties into shields and heraldry. So, you know, on the one hand, you know, he's just trying to make pretty pictures, I think. You know, you don't want to necessarily assume too much meaning on the part of an illustrator who's you know, an artist who's not, you know, he's not thinking, he's not part of the emergence of kind of occult and hermetic traditions of the 19th and 20th centuries. He's just making art. But nonetheless, I find this deck very readable as long as I'm willing to really look at what I'm seeing. Sometimes it, as we've seen, sometimes it connects to Rider-Waite-Smith imagery. Sometimes it doesn't. I like this, the king of coins, right? This is not someone who looks like they're on top of the world. This is not like the King of Pentacles. Like, you know, look at that raised eyebrow. He's got a lot of worries here. And interestingly, you know, he seems to be counting his coins, or maybe even minting coins. Like that image. The hourglass, you know, time is fleeting. And yet, you know, he's messing around with coins. He seems worried. This is not a triumphant king. And he's sitting too, come to think of it. So the 2 standing kings are the batons and swords, and then the 2 sitting kings are cups and coins. Yeah, okay. Tarot of the Master. And just to kind of close things out with a quick reading of this, from this deck, I want to demonstrate the amazing shuffleability of these cards. You know, that they're that beautiful cardboard stock that we've come to associate with the handcrafted quality of Il Meneghello decks. But typically, Il Meneghello decks are really hard to shuffle. But they are stiff cardboard. Okay, I'm going to turn this off now and shuffle more completely, and then come back and do a quick reading. So let's do just a quick 3-card reading. I want to sort of put into practice this sense I have from this deck that it really helps train us to read carefully, to look, to see what there is to see. It just feels so beautiful. Okay, so sort of just leaning into the present moment. What is this? What does Vacchetta have to tell us? Now, just a word about reversals. So a lot of people will argue that even if you are used to reading reversals with contemporary decks, Waite-Smith style decks, when you're working with pip decks, reversals are just a distraction. I disagree. I tend to read reversals all the time. But for me, reversals, there isn't sort of a hard and fast meaning to the reverse card. It's more a sense, it's like the Hanged Man. You know, the card is come up by its foot. So, you know, something is being dangled in front of us and is asking us to pay particular attention. So that might mean that there's a blockage. It might mean that this is a point of special emphasis. It might mean that this is a central card. In a 3-card spread, to have the middle card be reversed, that seems significant. And to have the middle card be reversed because it's Trump 13, it's death, that's even more important. So we've got the Knight of Swords moving into death reversed, moving into the world. The world here has such a powerful emphasis of seasons, of change and renewal. Death, you know, with its sort of cutting away of what was before, and particularly in this version of the card, we see, you know, all of, we don't see people, we see the elements of people's lives, the things that define them. If you remember from when I was doing the walkthrough, the way in which in the Spades we had the symbol, the helmet, and the gauntlet, the glove. We've got those symbols of rule, of kings, of knights, of, you know, of the page with his shield as he's announcing his fealty. And this fact that death doesn't just have a scythe, he has what I think is a little dagger, and he's got that ribbon, right? The ribbon that we see through everything, plus this, you know, this winged helmet, which almost looks like a halo, this ship in the backdrop. You know, our lives being cut away, the elements that make our lives have meaning, give us identity through our lives being cut away, but this is now reversed. So what process in the change of identity that we all undergo in the movement of the seasons, what process is being obstructed here? What are we holding on to? This central card is asking us what we are holding on to. And the fact that the Knight of Swords is holding on to his sword, not in a way that makes it particularly useful. You know, in fact, to hold on to your sword by the blade is more dangerous than it is wise. The harm is going to happen to you more than to your opponent. But it is a stance of announcing one's readiness. I'm here, but I'm here for what? What am I holding fast to that I need to let go of in order to let the world turn, in order to let the seasons move, in order to let myself move forward? So this 3-card spread, you know, depending on who I might be meeting with this spread or what moment in my own life I'm meeting, this seems to me to be a spread that's asking first and foremost, what change am I resisting? What natural movement am I resisting? How am I showing up, perhaps, for a battle that happened long ago? Can I bring my energies fresh to this moment and meet it for what it is rather than what I might imagine it to have been? How can I let transformation happen? How can I let the moment turn? How can I let my life shift and change? Okay. The Tarot of Giovanni Vacchetta, Vacchetta Tarot, Il Meneghello limited edition version of that deck. Thank you all so much for watching. This is my little bow, which looks really silly when you see my hands, and not me. Thank you so much for watching, and thanks as always for your practice.